One of the ways that we can measure what a person is really like is how they learn from situations, even if they've completely caused a situation, even if they have like driven a truck into a tree and it was completely their fault, how do they recover? How do they go, I've done this, I've learned from this, I'm moving forward. So I'm such a fan of that, but it starts with awareness and it starts with compassion as well, because if we made ourselves feel bad about all of those trucks that we've driven into all of those trees, obviously a metaphor here, then we would never move forward. So recognizing that we are fallible and acknowledging that is such a huge part of this work.
What a beautiful conversation we are going to step into together with Ruth Kudzi. Ruth is on a mission to support people to perform more effectively in a way that enhances their well-being. She's got a new book out called How to Feel Better: 4 Steps to Self-Coach Your Way to a Happier, More Authentic You. She is a coach and she runs a training program, which you'll hear all about in this episode. She's been studying psychology and neuroscience since 1994 and uses this to inform her approach to coaching with a big focus on performance and well-being. As someone who's always been a top performer, first at school, then in her recruitment roles, then in education, becoming deputy head of a large secondary school in her early 30s, it always looked like she was performing well. She worked hard and she played hard, but her emotional and physical health was not at its best, so she looked for another way. Fast forward to today, she runs 2 businesses around her young family and has added to her expertise with PGG Cert in coaching, as well as becoming one of less than 100 master certified coaches in the UK. But she came dangerously close to burnout during that time, managing multiple businesses, having a young family, and feeling responsible for paying a lot of salaries put pressure on her to do more. Can you relate? Have you been there? The do more, be more cycle we get stuck into can be a lot. A mini stroke in March 2023 was the wake-up call she needed to implement all the things she talks about with her clients. Now she works less hours, her well-being is higher, and she made sure she got the right support to lean into what she needs. She embodies the work she does with her clients. As you look back and you hear this story and we step into this conversation, you are going to be able to see how Ruth got where she is today, the strategies, the techniques, the evidence-based methodology she uses is truly unique. And I am so grateful to be here with you as we step into this moment with Ruth. Ruth, it is so good to be here with you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, how are you today?
I'm really good. Yeah. I'm excited for this.
I'm excited too. What is awesome in your world right now?
Do you know what? It's awesome right now in the fact that it is beautiful weather and I am in the UK. So anyone listening will know that that is not normal. It's becoming more normal. So it's beautiful weather. And do you know what? It feels like we're at a point in our business now where we've got everything like in place and planned. And people listening to this might think, oh my gosh, like, don't you always? But there's definitely been times where we've been like catching our tail and it feels like we're just like, okay, we know what we're doing. We're like, it's like we've got into that rhythm and that feels really, really lovely. I'm taking my first 2-week holiday from the training business since it's been kind of at the level it's at in a couple of weeks. And I feel like, there's nothing really that people are going to need me for. And that's what you want as a business owner, isn't it? In a way, not to always be needed. That's what I want anyway.
That is a good feeling. It's interesting. There've probably been seasons in my career, in life, where I'm like, no, I can do this. They need me, but no.
Oh yeah.
You got this. You've got this.
And I definitely have that kind of, one of my directors said to me the other day, she said, sometimes you're really maternal in your energy and you're always like wanting to make sure that people are okay and everything's okay. She's like, sometimes you just need to be a bit more paternal in your energy and just let people get on with it. And I was like, yeah, that's really true. But I just loved the way that she said it.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. It's that balancing of energies and you got to pull it all through at the right time. Exactly. Oh my goodness. You also, I know something else you have good going on, the launch of your incredible book.
Yeah. So it's not even a month yet. And I was just sharing with you that we're doing really well with sales. It's been stocked in physical bookstores. And I think that's like the amazing thing. People taking a picture of your book on, like, oh my gosh, I just went to, like, in the UK, we have a store called WH Smith's, which is a bit like, I mean, it's not really like Barnes and Noble, but I'll pretend it's like Barnes and Noble. But it's like a low grade Barnes and Noble. And people are like, oh my gosh, Ruth, I've seen it and taken pictures. And that just feels really real. So I think, it's a big thing to get a book out there as well, because it's part of you. It's like a child.
Do you feel deeply connected to this book in particular?
Yeah, I think so. It's really interesting because this book took a long time to write. So I made the decision to write it 4 years ago. So did my first book, was self-published, wrote it in about 6 months. And then I made a decision to write this, and it took about 4 years, and we got a publishing deal and all of those things. But it took, I think, like, this time last year, I was going back to the publisher and they were saying, no, we need more of you in it. We need more of you in it. And I think that was the thing that I was like, oh my gosh, you need more of me. But actually, in the end, it is exactly how it needs to be. And the process and everything worked. It was an incredible experience.
It is a beautiful book too. I agree that what you pulled in of your story, as well as the balance with the science. And like, when you are talking through, like, this is your amygdala and this is what it looks like. And like, seeing the visuals. I mean, the way that you shaped story and science and the visual cues are really incredible. And I know the reviews also echoed that. So I'm seeing that other people are feeling that also, that you being in it is really incredible.
Yeah. And I think you always worry, don't you, that when you reveal, like, the real you, that people are not going to like it. But what I've learned over time is the more that I actually reveal the real me, and I say things like, actually, I've got ADHD and I'm there, people are just like, oh. And then they are like, oh, well, actually, I've also got ADHD, or actually, I really struggle with X, or Y happens to me. So there's this lovely power of being, I think it's about, like, being confidently vulnerable. So you're not sharing. Amy Porterfield says this. So you share from the scar, not from the scab. Because when you share from the scab, you're picking it and it's disgusting. But when you share from the scar, you can share that vulnerability. And that's just stayed with me. And I think it's so true. So it's all about, okay, let's share the learning and the vulnerability rather than just sharing kind of the when we're in it, because then we don't really have that clarity.
For anybody who is listening, wondering right now, what is this book? What are we talking about? The name of Ruth's new book is How to Feel Better: 4 Steps to Self-Coach Your Way to a Happier, More Authentic You. So what you're saying is so aligned with that, on the vulnerability, the healing. As you were writing this book and as you were writing the steps that you take people through, these 4 incredible, clear, concise, actionable, powerful steps, how did you build and develop these? And how then have you built them over time in your life?
It was really interesting because I actually got the deal to write the book when I was going through a time in my life when I'd actually stepped back from my business, my coaching business. I was still leading the training business. We're going through, like, a lot of stress because we were buying our house and it took ages. And we had, like, at one point we had 2 houses in London and a flat as well. Like, that weren't, we've got properties that we rent out, but these were just like empty properties. There's only 4 of us. We don't need 2 houses and a flat to live. So there was a lot of stuff going on. And I went back to, really basics, like, what do you do when you're stuck? And it's like, okay, well, first of all, you go, right, what is going on? Right, we've got 2 houses and a flat. What do we do? And then you're like, okay, so then then what do we need? And it was just going back to those basic steps that I've always used and I use with clients, and then really thinking about examples and kind of the things that you need to consider going deeper at each level. So actually writing this book was amazing for me as well, because it was just, when you're thinking, and I guess everyone does this, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm writing a book about positive psychology and all of these things. I didn't feel great. Yeah. So it was really interesting.
How did that make you feel? Like, okay, I'm writing a book about how to feel better. I don't feel great. What did that bring up for you?
Oh my gosh. It brought up like, am I a fraud? Blah, 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 all of those things. But then what I recognized is actually I'm being really authentic, because I'm not feeling 100% and I'm going through this process of not feeling 100%. And actually that is what it's all about. So if I am able to go through this process, if I am able to feel better by doing these steps, then it's showing that it works. So yeah, it went from the I'm a fraud, I shouldn't be doing this, to thinking about, oh, actually, this is exactly what I need to be doing.
That's so good. Is your happiness set point naturally pretty high?
So it's really interesting, because in some ways, like, I think I'm an optimist. I'm always like, everything will work out, we'll always find a way. And everything kind of has worked out, even though the way might have been a little bit like, we might have gone way into the undergrowth. I used to live in Sydney, and I remember I always used to walk to work in Sydney, like through the undergrowth, because it was quicker. And I remember like seeing a snake and stopping doing that. But I think that I go through the undergrowth. It might not always be right, but I always think everything will work out. But I also think alongside that, I do have really high expectations for myself sometimes, and for what success will look like and what happiness will look like. And I've really worked on that, because what I've realized is it's not the big things. It's not the it's not the expensive holidays. It's not the, I love holidays, but it's not those. It's the day-to-day moments. And that's a lot about what the book's about. It's about the joy in the journey. Because I always used to be delaying that as well. Like, when I get to X, business owners always, when I get to X, when I'm making 6 figures, when I'm making 7 figures, I'm going to relax more. Don't. Like, basically, all you do is create a blueprint of working all the time, that when you get to 7 figures, you're still working all the time. And you're like, what have I just created for myself?
What have I done?
What have I done?
And you experienced that. You experienced a season where you had rapid growth is it in one of your companies, or would it be a department of your company?
Yeah. So I've had my own coaching business for about 7.5 years, but I've got a training business as well, which is nearly 4 years old. And that business, in its second year, so in its first year, did 6 figures. Second year, we hit 1 million. So we hit 7 figures. And so all of those, I'll say it wasn't planned. It was amazing. It was brilliant, but it was also really, really hard, because all of the things that when you reflect on, you look back, you're like, I knew that. But when you were in the moment, it was like I was kind of running on a bit of adrenaline. It was 2021. So we were still in COVID times. And I stopped, and I've never done this before. I stopped a mastermind that I was running in my coaching business. And I just said, right, I'm not coaching for a while, because actually I didn't think that I was in the right mindset to coach, but also I got this kind of massive business and I wasn't running it that strategically. It was just kind of running, and there were lots of things that I learned and, along the way. So that was really interesting and a massive learning experience. Because of course you see all these things, you see people. I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'd love to have a 7-figure business and blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, yeah, but maybe
I love it and I'm grateful. But
actually, it taught a lot. And I think taking a step back was something I had to do for my own mental health too, because there was so much going on. And I think sometimes we think that taking a step back, people are going to think, oh my gosh, you're not good enough, or all of these things. But when you're kind of forced to, what you recognize is that most people are there cheering you on and supporting you.
That's really neat. I feel as you were making that decision, or as you started sharing about that decision, I don't think it was real time, right? But later, as I learned, like, you paused your business for a period of time. I thought that is awesome. How courageous, how in integrity, how scary that must
really
have
scary,
been. Yeah. And did you have thoughts of, like, what thoughts came up? Like, what's coming up for me is, what if I can't restart it? What if, right, people aren't cheering for me, but you found they were? What came up for you?
What if, I'd always, like in my coaching business, I'd always sold out masterminds. I'd always sold out things. What if I come back and no one wants to work with me? What if those people that I've refunded and said, I'm no longer running this, are saying bad things about me? I mean, I used to worry so much about what people said about me. And I think I still worry a bit, but I'm nowhere near where I was. So there's lots of kind of, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. But what's really interesting is, actually, some of those clients who'd been in my mastermind, which I cancelled, they then still came back and worked with me one-to-one later on. That was a massive thing. So of course I was thinking, are these people ever going, is anyone ever going to trust me? Like, all of those thoughts were going through my mind. But actually, when you reflect, many of these things are just not true. But we just tell ourselves all these stories. But it's terrifying, because as well, some people are saying, oh my gosh, are you still on a break? But actually, are you still on a break? No, great, I want to work with you. Or I remember my coach saying, like, it's actually given me permission to have a bit of a pause as well, because she was going through a particular period in her life.
This is really beautiful. Okay, so you paused coaching.
Yeah.
Training company had rapidly grown. And you refocused energy on the training company?
Yeah. So we'd rapidly grown, and that again, like I'm a very trusting person. So I'm very much like, what you see is what you get. Actually, someone said, like, I can do all of this stuff. I'm like, oh, brilliant. Believe them. So what had happened is I'd recruited the wrong people into the wrong roles. And the irony is that I used to work in recruitment. So I should have known better, but I didn't know better. So actually, there was lots of going back to, okay, who do we need in what role? Like all of that kind of building blocks of having a business, I had to go back and redo. And with that, I mean, it took probably from like September, it took a year. It took us a year really to get the right people in the right positions. So now in the last year, the only person who's left the business is somebody who retired, which was I was like, please don't retire. You're amazing. But actually, we have got stability now. People are happy and we're really delivering. But that took time. And I think it's one of the things that people don't really talk about, because actually managing people is hard. And I've managed people in my like education role, my corporate role, but managing a team when it's your business, there's so much. And when it's your business and you're growing really rapidly, and when it's your business and you've got other things going on, that is a different level. And I think that what I also thought is I was like, oh my gosh, I am not good enough. I've made all these decisions. And then the more that I spoke to founders and other people, they're like, oh my gosh, I went through something similar. And I think that was incredible, because I felt like it was me. I felt like I'm never going to be able to do this. And then now I'm like, okay, it wasn't me. It was just circumstances. I made some mistakes. I got things wrong, but we're all learning. And that's what I say to any client or anyone who works with me.
Yeah. bringing it back like that to the self-coaching of
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause you use everything that you go through. The self-coaching model that you've developed, you were using it. It sounds like you were using it while you were writing about it. You have used it in the past. You've had the methodology, but then like, okay, how fascinating and very meta. I'm like, okay,
yeah, I know.
productive. I love it. And so as you think about coaching and the benefits around coaching for you, for the people you see in your lives, I mean, and self-coaching was one of the first things that I stepped into when I was running and I still use principles of it today. I've sort of developed my own self-coaching mindsets, which you speak to, like you're going to build your own model for self-coaching yourself. I'm like, yes. I was nodding as I read so much. I'm like, this is good. This is great. So needless to say, for those of you that are listening, I would definitely recommend How to Feel Better. Plus it's going to look gorgeous on your bookshelf. But how does self-coaching help you and navigate all the things we're talking about?
It just helps you get awareness and perspective. So if we are not aware, then we don't really know where to go. And I think with self-coaching, that often we see all these things and we can become a victim and we can say, things are happening to us rather than us playing a part. And when we self-coach, we start to recognize, actually, it's never as easy as that person's bad, I'm good. We'd love to believe that, wouldn't we? But we're not 5 anymore. It is actually in that situation, I recognize that maybe what I did here caused something here. And actually, what can I learn from it? And I always say that like one of the ways that we can measure kind of what a person is really like is how they learn from situations, even if they've completely caused a situation, even if they have driven a truck into a tree and it was completely their fault. How do they recover? How do they go, actually, I've done this, I've learned from this, I'm moving forward. So I'm such a fan of that, but it starts with awareness and it starts with compassion as well, because if we made ourselves feel bad about all of those trucks that we've driven into all of those trees, obviously a metaphor here, then we would never move forward. So actually recognizing that we are fallible and acknowledging that is such a huge part of this work.
I love the awareness plus your addition of compassion there. That's something that I've had to work, primarily the self-compassion and being in alignment with. It's much easier sometimes but turning it around. What would you say is different with your coaching methodologies than others that are out there?
Because I'm quite a geek and my background is psychology and so I've got a psychology degree and a master's and various other things. I'm all about kind of the evidence base, but I'm very much around the positive psychology piece as well, because that's what's really helped me, going to the actually basic, gratitude, okay, so what am I grateful for? I'm looking out my window because we live opposite a forest. I love that. Okay, let's go into nature. Let's look at that. Because actually, when we look at a lot of these positive psychology processes, we're rewiring our brain. We're changing our neural pathways. So I'm very much about how can we work with our clients? And I know before we started, we talked about how people have talked about things like visualization on here. So I won't go deeply into that. But I love that. How can we help people step into this future version of themselves? And the science is that absolutely transforms the way people see opportunities. They become more creative. They solve problems. They're more motivated. So for me, it's how can we use the research base to help people to feel better, but also to make better decisions for themselves and their businesses. And most of my coaching clients are business owners, but most of my coaching is not about business, which is really interesting.
So good. What's the difference between the self-coaching that you walk people through and how to feel better versus what people go through in your experience?
Oh my gosh. So I think that self-coaching is fantastic to a point. However, Most of us don't go to the hard places. So first of all, having a coach really forces you to go to those hard places. So that's the first thing. So you can't hide. The second thing is that it's a really great reflective process. So you're able to really see and recognize everything that's going on. And I think that's really important, because when we are being coached, our coach, so if I'm coaching you, will notice energy shifts, like congruence between what we say and what else is going on. We can feel as well when we coach too, sometimes there might be something that someone's not saying, or we might feel like there's something more we might do. So there's so much more that a person can pick up on top of everything that we can do in self-coaching. So I think self-coaching, when you've got those tools, you can do it to yourself every single day, and it's amazing. I think that when you've got self-coaching alongside being coached, it can just make you completely, like, no one's going to mess with you. You're going to really get that clarity and that self-awareness and move forward. I think that's part of the magic.
That's good. I love that. As you were talking, I'm like, oh yes, you call it like, oh, there might be things you're hiding from, yourself, or what's being unsaid. I'm like, oh yeah, there are some things I'm totally tucking away that someone that I would be present with would totally call me out on.
Yeah.
Like, let's go there. So that challenge to go to the places that you need to go to move to the next level in that. I love that you mentioned reflection too. I'm a big fan of reflection, and doing that in tandem with someone is beautiful.
Yeah.
You also talk about identity.
Yeah.
What can you explain how you look at identity and the power of that?
So I think, like, there's loads of people who've talked about it, people like James Clear. And when we are wanting to change how we show up, we need to be clear on the identity of the person that we want to become. Because if we don't, then we have this kind of mismatch between our behaviors and actually what underpins them. So for me, it's about really embodying, like, who do I want to become? And I remember early on in my coaching journey, having, like, really kind of asking myself that question and saying, like, okay, oh my gosh, if I was a 7-figure business owner, what would I be doing? And I think I was better at being that 7-figure business owner, especially at the beginning, when I wasn't, than when I was, because I was like, oh, yeah, well, I would be.
So true.
Yeah, I would be, relax. Yeah, I'd be having time for me. I'd be doing this. I'd be doing that. And then it's like, So really understanding the things that you would be, really understanding those behaviors and how you would be showing up, and thinking about going into that detail, like what would I be thinking? Not only how would I be spending my time, but what would I be thinking? How would I be behaving? What would I be feeling? And I do it even, so I'm training for a half marathon at the moment. And, like, I love my bed, but in the morning I'm like, well, how do I want to be when I finish that half marathon? Like, 2 of my friends are doing it too. So I don't want to be the last person. Like, and then, okay, so what do I need to do? Well, I need to actually get out of bed and open the front door and go for a run. But it's just reminding ourselves, like, I can stay here, I can stay in this identity, or I can change. And I'm the person that is able to do that.
It's so good. Several episodes ago on the podcast here, I shared that I was going through identity shifts. And honestly, I am still in it. I haven't answered. I mean, it's been months, a couple of months at least. And I don't think I fully answered it. And I did a simple exercise. I grabbed my notebook and I wrote down identities I embrace day to day right now. Business owner was totally at the top. And that struck me because I was like, do I want that to be at the top? And do I even want to identify in some of these ways, that came up? And then I reorganized it with, all right, what do I want at the top? And mom popped right up at the top, which wasn't always right, true, and always something, but mom, and then other things weren't there. And I shared this with some of my clients and they're like, oh, I'm surprised, like coach, mentor, consultant isn't on there. I'm like, oh yeah, no. Like I do those things, but they are not my identity. Which hearing them play some things back to me was also really interesting. I was just sharing a simple behind the scenes and they shared like, oh, collaborator, maybe more like, and then they threw out some other things. I'm like, oh, interesting. So it's, as you think about that coaching relationship that we were just talking about, going through these exercises, identifying in self-coaching, like right through how to feel better in the 4 steps that you've got, and then getting in conversation with someone around them, a coach, I could see how that would be so powerful because I felt that.
It is. That's so interesting as well, that our identity shifts.
Yeah.
And we need to be like aware of that shift. And as you said, when you reorganized it all and you're like, yeah, I want mum at the top. Like, why is mum not at the top? And I think that's a really interesting one for me as well, because actually I started my businesses to be around my children more. And then there were times when I'm like, I'm around them. I'm probably not around them less, because I was definitely not around them at all, like the older one at all. It was a lot more different. But it's like, sometimes we just get to places and we're like, why am I here? So it's really interesting.
And it was okay for a season, to your point, compassion, like that was, but it doesn't have to be what is. Forward. So reconciling that and then integrating and embedding the change. So you got the 4 steps: assess where you are, get clear, and everybody's just going to have to go through these because it's so good. Make a plan to take you forward, and then integrating, embodying it, embedding the change. What does this look and feel like when you get there?
Oh my God. Well, this feels like actually you feel secure in your identity and you have changed the way that you think, feel, or act. So it means that you have taken that time. And in taking that time as well, it's recognizing that some of that time might be you falling back out of doing things. I think this is part of the thing that we don't often see. We don't see the falling out. We think that it's always going to look a certain way, but actually this is about, okay, let's think about the long game. Let's really change, not just on a surface level, but let's actually behave in the way that is congruent with our identity. Let's show up in the way that we want to show up. Let's do those things that we want to do. Let's not just do it half-heartedly. And if we stop, let's come back and let's reflect. And all of those things, like it's everything together that make that difference.
Okay. So you mentioned you're moving through this change. You were writing, you paused the business. So you could move through the feeling better. And what has changed for you in that journey and in that space?
I think there's been a lot for me around letting go. So I think that actually I've been doing all this work, like what is an identity of a business owner that's making X amount? And then I'm like, well, actually I need to embody that. And I need to believe that. And now I need to believe that we're going to grow. And I need to be seen as a credible business owner. And that means me taking it seriously. And I think there was an element of that kind of stepping into being that person. So that's probably been my biggest shift in the way that I see myself. And also the way that I don't listen to a lot of the noise anymore. I remember even like, especially in the last kind of, in that year period when we were going through a lot of adjustments, listening to a lot of other voices and then getting really lost in what actually was true and what wasn't. And now I'm like, actually, I'm listening to my inner voice and I am this person and I'm surrounding myself with other people who are doing great things. And that is about having the confidence to step into that identity and also doing the things that are congruent with it.
Yeah. What did you have to let go of?
A lot of self-judgment and self-doubt. It was, for me, it's always about me more than others. I had to let go of some of the things that I'd done that I wasn't proud of, but a lot of it was I had to let go of self-judgment, self-doubt, this feeling that I always needed to be on and working hard. Like that was a massive thing for me. And I'm still working through it. And definitely, we've got our 2-week break, which I said, and then we've got August is a quieter month for us. And then September, like we've got so much space. So it's about creating space, and letting go of this need to always be busy. Yeah.
Oh, huge. And I think this is huge for I see so many people working through this right now. We had that experience, that global experience together, and we got back to normal. And now like, oh, wait, I don't know if that's what it should look like. So I think your book is so timely. I think the work you're doing is so beautiful. For people to find you, dive into this with you, where do people go?
Yeah, so I am the only Ruth Kudzi, well, except for all the imitators on Instagram. Ruth Kudzi, so it's Ruth Kudzi, Kudzi. I've got a website by that name. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook on that name. And then you can link into Optimus Coach Academy, which is a training school as well.
So dang good, Ruth. You are a gift. Your work is a gift. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.